Hello and welcome to Mrs. E English Skills. I'm Mrs. E and today I'm starting an exciting 6-week course for creative writing. So for anyone who's interested in writing stories, novels, poetry, or just wants to get into writing something creative to help you through life, for therapy, for any of those things, then hopefully this course will help you out. So today we're looking at week 1, getting creative. How do we spark creativity when we're sat with a blank page in front of us? Enjoy! So let's talk about igniting your imagination. It's difficult to start writing without some sort of prompt, so sometimes we need something to help spark our imagination. In a moment, I will show you a number of images. What I'd like you to do is when each image is shown, write down any words that spring to mind. Anything straight away. Don't think about it, just write. Words, phrases, sentences, just anything that springs to mind. By the end of the exercise, you should have a page filled with random words. Okay, are you ready? Let's go. How did you get on? Did you get a full page of words? Don't worry if not, just go back and repeat the exercise just until you've got a nice selection of words on a page. But you should end up with something along the lines of this. So it could be words, phrases, sentences, descriptions, just anything that's sprung to mind without thought, just free writing as much as possible. So you can see here I've got a few words to play with. So these are the words that I got from those pictures. As I'm carrying on through the rest of this exercise, I want you to follow my lead, do what I do, but try and do it with your words rather than mine, unless you feel more inspired with my words. But a good idea is to use the words that you found to find your story within your words from your mind. So the first thing you need to find is a setting. So within your words, can you find anything where you can set your story? A place, a time, a dimension, completely anything at all. So for me, in mine, I found temple, lakeside, twilight, and beneath the trees. So my story could be set in a temple, on the lakeside, beneath the trees, at twilight. Okay? Can you find something in your story and jot down the setting that you've found within your words? Okay, so once you've got a setting, you need to find some characters. So can you find any characters or be inspired by your words to create characters from your page of writing? You don't have to stick with the words on your page. If you are presented with an idea, say you pick, on mine I pick the word bright, I might instantly think of a character based on that word, someone that I know that I think is quite a bright, colourful, clever person. Then I can maybe think about those as a character, but I have been inspired by the words on my page. For me though, I've noticed princess and innocence and lover and darkness. So I've got an idea there of royalty, a princess, an innocent princess, innocent being, and then a lover with darkness within them. So always an interesting topic to go with, a robbing of innocence by a darkness there. See what you can find in yours. Okay, so once you've got a setting and some characters, we need to have some sort of plot. So plot just means storyline. So what's going to happen in your story? What is the storyline? And this will indicate genre as well. So genre is just type of story. A horror, crime thriller, romance, any of those, fantasy. So can you see a plot within your words? For me, I have seduction, I have matrimony, and I have despair. So it's made me think along the lines of my innocent princess character is seduced by the dark lover, and maybe they get married and this ends up in despair. So that idea of dark seduction is going to be my plot. So it could be the romance genre, it could be a horror genre, or it could be a dark romance. But I've got a starting point, and that is the main thing that you're trying to get from this free writing exercise. So have you got a plot there or a rough idea that you can jot down? So now you have a starting point. You can start writing this story. Even if it becomes a different story, it's inspired you to start writing and it's given you something to go with. It might be that you start writing this story and another story springs to mind, which happens to me quite often actually. I start writing a story from the free writing exercise that I've done, and that inspires another story that's got similar veins, but I move from the original story to the story I'd like to complete. So these free writing exercises, and you can look up lots of different types, are a great way to spark an idea when you have writer's block. It's a good idea to keep a notebook, or a digital notebook or a physical notebook and pen, so you can write whenever you have the opportunity. So you could be on a bus travelling to and from work or school or university or whatever, and an idea comes to mind, or you see something out the window, just start jotting something down. In a busy cafe, you might notice somebody in the cafe and you start to think, who is this person? Where are they from? Why are they in the cafe? What do they do for a living? Is there a darkness in there? Is there some light? So what you're doing there is character profiling. And if you just jot it down in a notebook and you're trying to find a character later on when you're writing, you've got one there already, made to some extent, that you can twist and turn to suit the story that you're writing. Physical description's great as well, and the way that people speak, and I'll talk about this more in a later video. Getting to know accents and how people interact with each other as well, and jotting that down, it makes your story more believable. If you're out in nature, and I remember in university, one of the first things we did is we went for a residential in Wales, and at midnight we went in the middle of a forest. We spread out, we sat on a bin bag with a little torch on our heads, and we just had to sit and write whenever the tutor shouted write. And just being in nature, the signs, the sounds around us, the feel, all our senses were brought to life. Just writing down things that come to mind there can really help when you're trying to describe a setting, and make the reader feel as if they are wherever it is that you want them to be. Or when listening to music. Often before I go to sleep, I'll listen to a bit of music, and then I start to sort of daydream or fantasize, and a story comes to mind. And if I've got my notepad there or my phone, I can just jot down whatever it is I've just made up in my head. And again, later on, maybe I'll want to write a story and I'm not sure what to write, or when I want to write it, what I want to write it about. I can just pick up my notebook and have a little read through, and there'll be something in there that can start me off. You can always return to it, as I've said, to help you begin a new story or poem whenever you're ready. So that is a great addition to the writer's toolkit, is a notebook or a note writing device. So as I said at the beginning, this is a 6-week course. So I just wanted to let you know what we're going to be doing over the 6 weeks. So today we were looking at getting creative, so how to inspire creativity, but we're also going to start looking at story writing. And I'm focusing on short story for this course because it's easier in terms of the length to look at in such a short course. But all the techniques that I go through can be applied to any creative writing. So it could be a novel, it could be a play, it could be poetry, which we are going to be looking at. So it's all relevant when it comes to creativity. So today we're looking at introduction to short story, and then how to open a story, how to begin a story, and what we want to achieve in ending a story. And then week 2, we're going to look at building character and character conversations, which is dialogue. Week 3, we're going to be looking at adding tension, pace, and narrative devices, so all similes, metaphors, foreshadowing, all of those good things that I've talked about in previous videos, such as the GCSE playlist, to try and keep our writer engaged and make them seem like they're part of that story. And then week 4, we're moving on to poetry. So we're going to look at an introduction to poetry, how to rhyme, different structures, with ballad. And then week 5, we're going to look at a sonnet, writing a sonnet. And week 6, my personal favourite, the villanelle. So what is a short story? It's a snapshot of a significant moment where there is a disturbance in the status quo. So it's not a full journey, it's just a snapshot, it's a moment in time. Whereas a novel will be a full journey, but we haven't got the word count in a short story to do that. So a disturbance in the status quo just means you're trundling on in life, going along, and then something happens. It could be a memory. So a memory springs to mind, and that memory could be your short story. It could be a phone call. You could bump into someone. It doesn't have to be based on sort of real life, real time. It could be back in time. It could be in the future. It could be fantasy, high fantasy, witches, wizards, whatever. But it is just a snapshot of that disturbance. And we want to try and get to the action straight away because we haven't got time to do that build-up that you can do in a novel. To get the hang of a short story, it's useful to read as many as possible by different authors with different genres, just to get an understanding of the language and structural techniques used in such a short narrative. It's also a really good idea to read as much as possible in terms of stories or poetry, just to get, I suppose, to fill your mind palace, I like to say, to quote Sherlock, with as many different words, as many different ways of presenting something, describing something, in order to make your stories as engaging and as believable as possible. So extend your vocabulary, be a wordsmith, craft language, weave stories. That's what we want to achieve. So the more you read, the better writer you will be. And whenever I'm marking GCSE stories or my creative writing stories in where I work, I know someone who's well read by the quality of their stories, their written work, their creative work. So that's just something to bear in mind. So let's look at starting stories. So how to begin a short story. You need to hook your reader with your first paragraph. So as soon as possible, you need to captivate the reader and promise things to come. There's got to be that promise there to make them want to read on to find out what's going to happen. There are countless ways you can do this. As with creative writing, anything goes. But we're going to look at some together, just a short few, just to try and inspire that creativity. So how can we begin a story? Well, there are several approaches that you can take when opening your story, and we're going to look at some today. So we're going to look at anecdote, which is a brief story, a definitive statement, set an interesting scene, pose a question, or dismiss a common view. So let's look at an anecdote. There was a desert wind blowing that night. It was one of those hot, dry Santa Anas that come down through the mountain passes and curl your hair and make your nerves jump and your skin itch. On nights like that, every booze party ends in a fight. Meek little wives feel the edge of the carving knife and study their husbands' necks. Anything can happen. You can even get a full glass of beer at a cocktail lounge. So seemingly unrelated to the story, an anecdote can really set the mood, the atmosphere, and maybe even elements of scene, character, gives clues to what might happen. There's a lot within that anecdote, desert wind, booze party, fighting, carving knife, and potential murder. So there's lots in there that's made the reader think and feel several things, which could intrigue them to read on. So a definitive statement, a statement that is said as a fact, cannot be argued with, it's the way that it's said. So let's look at an example. Justice. You get justice in the next world. In this world you have the law. So the idea that this person, this character, whoever is saying this, completely and utterly disagrees that there is such thing as justice in this world. So what has made this character feel that way? Why do they feel as if you only get judged through death or fair judgment and that element of justice? Very intriguing. Makes me wonder what's happened to this character in order for them to come up with this view on life. Okay, set an interesting scene. So it's got to be something more than it was a beautiful sunny day. There's nothing that really captures my attention there. It's very cliche. So let's look at an example. The sky above the port was the colour of television, tuned to a dead channel. So what's interesting about that? What's intriguing about that? Well, first of all, a colour, I wouldn't think of television as a colour. And tuned to a dead channel. You should think about it, certainly if you're my age or above. You should think about this image that I've put on the screen now. That's in my day when I was younger, that's what a dead channel looked like. But even today, a dead channel would just be a blank screen. It's dark or grey or busy or an element of static. So what is it about the sky that sets the mood in that story? It doesn't sound like it's going to be a positive story. It maybe puts you on edge straight away. So it's an intriguing scene and I want to find out more. Posing a question is a good technique because questions need answers, and often when we're asked a question or we see someone be asked a question or we're questioning ourselves, we are searching for that answer. So let's look at an example. What's in a name? Nothing and everything. It is after all just a name, one tiny piece of the puzzle that makes up a person. However, when someone has a nickname like Dumbo, a name can be the major force in shaping one's sense of self. That's how it was for me. So this story begins with what's in a name? It's a rhetorical question. What do we think's in a name? What does a name mean to us as people? But then we're given more information that this person's got a nickname of Dumbo. And what can that suggest about this character? And what happens to us? How do we feel about this character? For example, when I see they've got a nickname like Dumbo, it suggests to me that they're being unfairly treated a certain way due to their appearance. Maybe they've got larger ears. And I start to sympathise with that character. So I become defensive for that character. So I'm on that character's side already because I feel like they're being bullied. And then I want to carry on through the story to try and protect that character. So that's the effect that has on me. And the last one I'm going to look at is dismiss a common view. Say the opposite to what people think, because that will be intriguing because they'll be thinking, oh, that's wrong. Why have they said that? I want to know why they think that. Now, I've just come up with a really rubbish one, I think, to start with, but this is just an example I wrote. Let me tell you now, Friday the 13th is the luckiest day ever. I'm sure you can think of something better to dismiss a common view, something more profound, but essentially Friday the 13th is meant to be an unlucky day. So if I start my story off by telling you it's the luckiest day ever, that might intrigue you because it's not common for that to happen, and you might want to find out why they've drawn this conclusion at the beginning of the story. Can you think of any other ways that maybe you could begin a story to hook your reader? You can also look up online or, in books, ways that other writers have begun their stories, and think about when you've read a story, what has hooked you from the start? What was it that made you want to carry on reading? And can you employ a similar technique in your own writing? So let's have a go then. What I'd like you to do is return to your setting, characters and plot, as well as the rest of your written words, and use them to write an opening paragraph with one of the techniques discussed. So if you can't remember, just go back in the video and have a little look at the techniques and the examples. Pick one for now and try to write an opening paragraph with that technique and applied to your story. Pause the video here to have a go before I reveal my version that I've chosen, or you could just watch my version first to give you an idea for yours. So, I've gone with, when temple bells rang on soft summer mornings, birds would rise up and cover the sky in clouds of black feathers and screeches of fate. The village folk would jolt awake, dropping to the floor in prayer to ward off dark spirits. When temple bells rang at twilight, shutters banged tight, lights were extinguished, and village folk prayed again to get through the night in peace. All but one. Can you identify which technique I've used? So I've used anecdote. So this is a story about, a brief story about what happens when the temple bells ring. So on soft summer mornings, we start off quite gentle. We have birds rising up and then covering the sky in clouds of black feathers. So the connotations around black feathers means darkness, demonic maybe, something to be weary of. And then the screeches of fate. It's quite a sharp onomatopoeic sound. Onomatopoeia just means the word sounds like what it's describing, which is quite harsh. So it starts off soft summer mornings, but straight away we are brought into a harsh environment. The villagers are jolting awake, so there's that idea of surprise, shock, fear, and then immediately dropping to the floor to pray. And usually drop to the floor to pray when you're worried or concerned, and it's saying they're going to ward off dark spirits. So as a reader, you might be thinking, why do they feel as if dark spirits are trying to invade? And then we've got the temple bells ringing again at twilight. So remember, twilight is with my setting at the temple, the lakeside under the trees. So I've included all of that in terms of setting. The shutters bang tight, so they're shutting the windows, they're closing up. Why are they so eager for the village folk? Why are the village folk so eager to shut up their houses and extinguish the lights? And then they're praying to get through the night in peace. So what's the impending doom there? All but one. So that's sort of to introduce my character, my princess, who's not banged up tight in her house. She's there, and it opens the door for the dark lover, the seductor, to come and seduce her, and I can carry on with my plot. How did you do? So now I just want to talk a little bit about ending a story. I know we've only just started off. We're thinking about how to start the story. We've got an idea of plot. So in terms of the end, maybe we won't fully know what's going to happen until we get there. That's the way I write. I know some people will write their ending and then try and achieve that from the beginning. So it just totally depends which natural way to write suits you. But there are many ways to end a story. It's infinite, the possibilities. But you have to ensure that it's satisfying for your reader. So, if the story has had impact, your reader should feel one of the following emotions. Sadness. So it could be sadness that the story is over. I'm sure you've read many stories or watched stories on TV, movies, TV programs, and when that's come to an end, you've been devastated because you wanted to carry on watching more and more and more. Or they could be sad because a character is emotional, something terrible's happened to a character, something sad has gone on there. It's affected your reader in that way. They could be relieved that a series of events have finished. So maybe the character's gone through a turbulent time or had to overcome lots of obstacles, and then finally they have. And you've done a bit of a roller coaster in terms of your technique. There's been ups and downs and ups and downs. And then finally it's come to a conclusion that's soft, and your character that you've been following is finally okay. Shock, that something unexpected has happened. So a plot twist at the end is always good. Very clever technique if you can try and put that in. And surprise is similar but not quite as harsh as a shock. So a clever ending or a circular ending for a comedy maybe, or something humorous, or a nice light-hearted tale. Horror, you could be completely horrified by the ending. It's a complete disaster. Not the type of stories that I enjoy reading. Well, I enjoy writing, but lots of people do, especially if you're into the horror genre. Or smugness, you had it worked out all along. Now, this idea of smugness, if you're thinking about a crime thriller, a whodunit, although you want your reader to feel smug, you don't want them to guess the ending too quickly. So if you're not going for a shock or surprise ending, you want them to feel that element of smugness. You've got to work it so they just work out the answer before you end the story. And that's how you can achieve the smugness without making the writing boring, because they've already worked out in the first few pages who done it. Once we've looked at how to add tension, pace, and make use of narrative devices, you should have a better idea of how to achieve one of these emotions by the end. So keep this in mind as we go through the rest of this course, and start to think about it near the end of the third week, particularly because you should be able to have finished writing a story, maybe even the story that you started writing today. So until next time, use the skills gained today to write a skeletal story that can be adapted over the next 2 weeks. So try and extend your plot. Write a rough idea of what the storyline's going to be, where you're going to go with it, and then next week and the week after we'll just add to it. We'll fluff it out with lots of writing techniques to make it an effective story. So thank you for watching this first in a 6-week course of creative writing, and I'll hope to see you soon for the next one.